watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Razan Pereira. The Parliament on Friday approved an amendment to the anti-terror law to give powers to the central government to designate an individual as a terrorist and seize his properties. While Lok Sabha had passed the Unlawful Activities Prevention Amendment Bill of 2019 that seeks to amend the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act of 1967 on July 24th, the Rajya Sabha approved it by voice vote on Friday after rejecting an opposition-sponsored motion to send it to a select committee. Rajya Sabha rejected the opposition-sponsored motion to send the amendment to the select committee with 104 votes against it as compared to 85 in favour. The House passed the amendment to the law with 147 votes in favour and 42 against it. Replying to a debate on the amendment, Home Minister Amit Shah said a 4-level scrutiny has been provided in the amendment and no human rights will be violated. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the Unlawful Activities Prevention Amendment Bill of 2019. Joining me on the program today are Navneet Vasan, former Director General of the National Investigation Agency; Anil Chaudhary, former Secretary, Internal Security, Ministry of Home Affairs; and Satya Prakash, Legal Editor of the Tribune. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Satya Prakash, I'd like to begin the program with you. Let's first try and understand and analyze the salient features of this bill.
Well, as you have already mentioned in your opening remarks, basically there are 3 points. One is designating individual as terrorist. That has been one of the major problems we faced. We wanted Masood Azhar to be designated as an international terrorist.
Hafiz Saeed.
Hafiz Saeed also. I mentioned Masood Azhar because that has been much more controversial at the level of United Nations. But we didn't have any provision in the law, UAPA, that could authorize the government to declare any individual as terrorist. We can designate a particular organization as terrorist, but not individual. So there was some lacuna in the law. So that needed to be addressed because many countries were asking, and we were told about some countries which were not supporting us on this issue, that they were also asking that you don't designate such people, you are asking the world to designate. So that was one thing. Second is some international obligations under a treaty signed by India. So our laws have to be in tune with the international conventions and treaties that we are parties to. One particular aspect is about attachment of property. If somebody's property has to be attached, the person who is under investigation under UAPA by the NIA Director General can authorize seizure and of that person's property. And then finally, it's about investigation. An officer of the rank of inspector can also investigate. These are the basic things. But the most controversial provision has been or is about authorizing the agency to designate individual as a terrorist. Or this is the most controversial part. How and because there are apprehensions which have been expressed by certain sections of the media and intelligentsia, and some members also tried to highlight these issues, that this is something which can potentially be misused. Whether it will be misused or not, that's only time will tell. But these are the basic features of this law. Rest, now that Parliament, both the houses, they have passed it, the rest of the formalities like President signing it and then official gazette notification, that will follow.
Absolutely. Mr. Chaudhary, let me bring you into the picture now. You know, as far as the concerns of this particular bill are concerned, that was rightly pointed out by Satya Prakash, that this particular bill can be misused. Is that concern justified?
Frank, my experience in investigation is limited. I have basically been a counter-terrorist, dealt with Kashmir, Northeast, Naxalism. And I feel that India faces one of the highest terrorist threats in the world, and the 10 top countries terrorist threats. What has happened in your neighborhood in Sri Lanka recently? So I'm all for the counter-terrorism acts to be made more stringent. Having said that, there were apprehensions and well-founded that if an individual can be declared a terrorist, what are the safeguards? But the safeguards, I am told, have been spelled out. There will be scrutiny They have to be acts of terrorism committed by the individual. And we have lone wolves who don't belong to any organization. Like the fellow who in New Zealand, he went and blew up the mosque, and how many people he killed? He did not belong to a terrorist organization. Lone wolves are active not only in India but also in Europe. The fellow who blew up the London Bridge, he was a lone wolf. So we have to also keep a watch. Any person who commits acts of terrorism, and that has to be recorded and evidence produced, adduced before a committee which shall say, yes, he should be a terrorist. And Hafiz Saeed, yes, the world over, we are asking him to be declared. So they ask, have you declared him a terrorist? No, we don't have the powers to declare. And you see, misuse, yes, misuse, I think any act of criminal act can be misused by the state police, less by the central organizations, which is, it's a, CBI is the father organization. They have the powers. The director CBI can order attachment of property of people in anti-corruption cases. But NIA DG has to go to a state DG. Why? Why should he go? He should be empowered to seize the assets of a terrorist organization or an individual. Also, investigating powers in the CBI are to the inspector. In the NIA, it's the DYSP. It's not the rank, it's the expertise in investigation which matters, according to me. If an inspector has experience, he is the better investigator, and then there's supervision. There's a very close supervision over counter-terrorist cases, let me tell you. The file will go right up to the DG's level. So the inspector will not have the last word. He will, you see, there's so much footwork involved, there's so much, legal evidence to be collected from the start. All that requires a team, and team can be led by an inspector. That's what I feel. And yes, individual, there should be, there have been apprehensions. I'm not, you see, what the opposition political parties express in Rajya Sabha, that political parties, but yes, you see, look at the US. After 9/11, their counter-terrorism act is so stringent, they can put anybody behind bars and throw them out of the country. What is that place called where they put them up?
Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah,
Guantanamo.
So there you are. That's the democracy, US, and here no individual rights, civil rights, this right, that right. And when people get killed, it is the police responsibility to protect the people. No.
So no compromise when it comes to terrorism is what you're suggesting?
Zero tolerance to terrorism, especially violence. Those who are taking to arms against the country integrity, yes, we have to go after them.
Absolutely. So let me go to Mr. Vasan now. Mr. Vasan, as far as this particular bill is concerned, the most important aspect is designating an individual as a terrorist. Now, how does that change things as far as the NIA is concerned?
You see, it is not for only NIA. The UAPA cases can be investigated by state police also. The only condition is, after the amendment, is that in state police, it's only an officer of the rank of DSP who will be able to investigate, whereas in NIA, officer of the rank of inspector of police will be able to investigate now onwards. There was a gaping hole in the act because it has no provision of designating an individual as a terrorist. Now, as my co-panelist has also told, there may be apprehensions, but then there, the amendment reads that believed to be involved in terrorist activities, blah, blah, blah. Now, believed to be, that means it has to be based on some objective criteria. In NIA or in state police cannot send a proposal to Government of India to declare somebody terrorist without adequate material on record. So unless that adequate material is on record with Government of India, and they will, I am sure they will set up a committee which will go through that material, and only then an individual will declare so. And the individual will have a right to appeal against his being designated as a terrorist now. So that will take care of it, and law always evolves over the time. So we need not be over, concerned on this issue. And let's see how the investigation agencies behave and how the Government of India, I'm sure they will take all precautions before putting somebody in the list of designated terrorists.
Right.
Coming to the investigation by an inspector, there is some criticism. The practical difficulty was that NIA was always short of DSPs, because you can't have so many DSPs working in NIA, a more number of inspectors working, and when they were working as a team, whenever some part of investigation was being undertaken by an inspector, a legal problem was coming up, because the law provided that it has to be a DSP who will investigate the case. And in case the DSP was not able to visit a particular spot to examine somebody, then it was a practical problem. I think this will remove that practical problem. And we have proposed the change in the law way back in 2014 and 15. It's not a new amendment which was proposed by NIA. Coming to the attachment of property, I know I faced a lot of difficulties in attaching properties through the DG of particular states. I will not name the states, but DGs just refused to attach properties of terrorists, even in cases which were referred by them to NIA for investigation. It was very, very, very difficult situation, and we failed to convince them, and they did not order the attachment. So I think this was also a required amendment, that NIA DG, whenever the case is investigated by NIA, that he should have the authority to authorize attachment of the property of a terrorist.
Right. So there were some practical problems, and those practical problems need to be addressed, and that's why the amendment was necessary, is what you're suggesting. Another important aspect that you've spoken about is how the law evolves over time, and how important is it for the law really to be ahead of the perpetrators. We'll talk about that in just a bit, but before that, Satya Prakash, what has our history and experience been with similar anti-terror laws in the past, like POTA and TADA and so on and so forth?
Well, some of these laws were actually abused, and then they were repealed. But here is a case which is a case of classical dilemma, and the tussle between individual freedom and the state's obligation to provide us security. And this is a classical dilemma because ever since human society evolved, as per social contract theory, we as a society, or members of the society, individual members, we surrendered certain rights in favor of the state in lieu of protection offered by the state. So this is how a state came into existence. So a state offers us protection, and we have, in lieu of that, we have surrendered certain rights in favor of the state. So how much rights can be surrendered in favor of the state and how much protection we need depends upon the time. As Mr. Chaudhary has pointed out, India faces tremendous threat in terms of terrorism, cross-border terrorism and also homegrown terrorism. So here is a time when we are faced with lots of challenges on the security front. We needed this kind of law, and Parliament in its own wisdom has provided for it. But constitutionally, if you examine Article 21, which talks about right to life and personal liberty, it says no person shall be deprived of his right to life and liberty except in accordance with procedure established by law. The constitutional requirement was procedure established by law. It's important. Why? Because the American Constitution, the Fifth Amendment, it talks about due process of law. Due process is a much larger concept where it is not just any procedure established by law or a law enacted by Parliament which prescribes a procedure. This law also prescribes a procedure. Due process is a much larger concept, wider concept. Why? Because it requires the law to be just, fair and reasonable. Unless the law, and here in the, it's important because in Maneka Gandhi's case, the Supreme Court has extended that due process law to India. So now we have imported that via a Supreme Court verdict. So it's interesting to see how, if this law is challenged, the Supreme Court examines it, because in fundamental rights cases and while exercising judicial review, they are generally very cautious, and they have to exercise a balance between individual rights and then a state's obligation to provide us protection, the larger societal interest. Where to draw the line, it is very difficult both at the executive level and at the judicial level. Executive level and legislative level also, the Parliament has taken a call. In case it is challenged at the judicial level, it will be tested on the touchstone of not procedure established by law. It will be tested on the touchstone of due process of law, which requires the law to be fair, just, and reasonable. And
Right.
it prescribes a much wider scope for judicial scrutiny. So let's hope this will pass the judicial scrutiny, given the fact that we are having sort of testing times in terms of the problems faced on the front of terrorism.
Sure. Talking about the problems that we face on the terror front, Mr. Chaudhary, is this amendment really going to answer several of the problems that we face on the terror front? Is it going to make it easier as far as fighting and tackling terror is concerned?
Frank, I'm very happy that the amendment has taken place. It was long overdue. As my fellow panelists pointed out, the wearer of the shoe knows where it pinches. How they were facing difficulty on the ground in prosecuting terrorists. Now, it will be easier for them to handle terrorism. And terrorism, as pointed out by me earlier and fellow panelists, we face a very high level of threat. So we've got to be all working together, the center, the state police and the central agencies, to root out terrorism. You know, zero tolerance. We will not tolerate anybody going about with bombs and guns, killing people left, right, in pursuance of some ideology or some, whatever belief, Naxalism. We know how it is, the tribals who have been dispossessed of their livelihood, being exploited by people living in cities, giving them guns and money, go and kill. We see, this is all that we have to stop. And we were facing problems in prosecuting them, especially our, criminal justice system in India takes a very long time for bringing culprits to book and getting them into prison. You ask people who have investigated, and even cases which are known to be true, they have been let free. Why? Nobody shall be punished unless he is believed to be innocent, till there is so much evidence. And evidence collection is not easy. It's difficult. So NIA's hands had to be, the agency was created to deal with terrorism. Earlier the CBI was handling both. It came into being for anti-corruption against Government of India employees. Then when terrorism, cross-border terrorism within the state came, they started doing that. Now they said, no, our hands are full. So they said, let's have a special agency to deal with cases of terrorism which have interstate reach. And so the NIA has to be made an agency which can investigate well and get prosecution done of terrorists.
Sure.
I think it's a very good step, long overdue. At my personal level, I'm happy.
Okay.
Yes, the safeguards against misuse have to be there. I'm sure they will be there. Scrutiny, appeals will be there.
Right. So talking about misuse and talking about the CBI, Mr. Vasan, I must ask you this, because the bill gives more teeth to the NIA, and the Supreme Court a few years ago, in fact, made the very famous observation as far as the CBI is concerned and called it a caged parrot. Is there a possibility where the same could happen with the NIA as well?
You see, anything can happen. We can't sit on judgment today that what will happen in future. It is for the police officers to remain professional, to remain accountable to law of the land, and to ensure that they follow principles of objectivity and professionalism in investigation. Now, they must not go overboard at the asking of somebody to cook up evidence or to create some material to get somebody, say, hypothetically designated as individual terrorist. Means I don't think police officers will stoop down to that level. I earnestly hope that will not happen. And if it has happened, courts are there, they will certainly come very heavy on NIA or any other investigation agency which puts up a material which is not reliable, not credible enough to get some individual declared as a terrorist under the new amendment. Now, another thing which I would like to point out, there is a constant need to train the police officer to investigate terrorist-related crimes, as now terrorists all over the world are using latest technology That was also one reason that there was a demand that, generally older people, older police officers are not very well, groomed in the technology. It is the young officers who are now coming and joining police forces. They are much more aware of the new technology, their own hands. They have done technical courses. So they may be much more professional in handling these cases, investigation of these cases. So I'm sure that closer supervision, as my co-panelist said, closer supervision and a professional investigation will ensure that the amendments are not misused, and NIA and the state police forces, whenever they investigate a UAPA cases, they will be much more successful.
Right. Okay. So, Satya Prakash, it brings me to my next question. Now, what are the circumstances and conditions under which an individual can be termed as a terrorist and be tried under this bill?
Well, primarily, it is a call to be taken by the investigating agency on the basis of evidence collected. And once an individual is designated, as in the case of an organization, it goes to a tribunal, and the tribunal examines, and then there is a finding, whatever decision has been taken by the executive in the first place, and the tribunal will say whether the decision was right or wrong. I am sure that kind of a scrutiny will be there in the case of individual also. It cannot be that investigating agency takes a call and that remains the final word. There has to be a judicial scrutiny, and I am sure there will be. But having said that, see, there are lots of things are being said. There are certain things about the nature of state and the kind of duties the state is supposed to perform, irrespective of the ideology of the ruling party. When it comes to the state, the ideology becomes the ideology completely becomes irrelevant. If the country has to be provided security and we are supposed to tackle terror, the ideology of the government, be left, right or center, it hardly matters. In many of the amendments to this law were carried out earlier by the government, which was ruled by some other party with different kind of ideology. So it's essentially about the Indian state and its obligation to provide us security at a time when we are faced with lots of challenges on terror front, and that is why this bill is important. But liberty, there are certain costs involved, and we need to be vigilant. That's it.
Right. So, Mr. Chaudhary, I'm going to go back to a couple of points that Mr. Vasan made about latest technology being used and the evolution of law. Now, how important is it for the law to be ahead of the perpetrators, and is that possible? Can the agencies be one step or two steps forward as compared to the terrorists or the perpetrators?
Frank, I do not share this optimism of yours, because the terrorists or the crime perpetrator will always be ahead of the agencies. They don't have to go with the tendering to acquire technology. They have no dearth of money. They have manpower. They acquire the latest, and their technology is changing so fast. How can the agencies keep trace? And he's very right. The younger brains are more tech savvy than the older experienced investigators. We must have younger people, all IT professionals who are investigating technology. They are ahead. They choose the time and the place. They carry out dry runs. And about evidence, we have to, the agency has to produce evidence that he was keeping explosives on such and such day, seize the explosive, arms, illegal arms, literature, and which is the sovereignty of the country is being questioned. All that is evidence, physical evidence, with witnesses, with magistrate being called in and everything. So it's not going to be misused. And I said, misuse, yes. Don't we know that thanedars in some parts of the country do things at the bidding of the political masters? Let's face reality on the ground. They do it. Absconder declare him, lock up his house. Why? But now the central agencies, I have not personally experienced them misusing their powers to fix people, opponents, political opponents. You see, they have to rise above because the national interest and as rightly pointed out, the primary duty of the state is to protect and the rights, the life and property of its citizens. And they are at a disadvantage. So their hands have to be strengthened by making their abilities to investigate more useful and more tangible and more result oriented.
Right.
So I'm happy.
Right. So, Mr. Vasan, closing comment from you. You spoke about the practical difficulties as far as the agencies are concerned. Mr. Chaudhary also pointing out about how the agencies will always be playing catch up as far as this particular game of cat and mouse is concerned. So, in such a scenario, what is the best way forward when it comes to dealing with terrorism? What more needs to be done?
See, as I mentioned in the beginning, it is extremely important to train a young officer in investigating these complicated cases, especially when a number of terrorists or their handlers are situated outside the country. Because with these days, with the help of technology, you can operate things from outside. You can transfer money. You can transfer, your contacts. You can tell your contacts by cryptic messages where the raw material for manufacturing explosives will be available. So you need to train them, as well as we have to keep our relations with countries, a kind of legal assistance in criminal matters, very, very up to date. And we have to also insist and strive for a common platform where we can share intelligence as well as evidence with other countries, because many times the evidence is available outside the borders. So that is another challenge which remains. And there is a need to set up a very, very professional central authority which can supervise the investigation, which can help the investigation agencies in conducting investigation outside the country.
Sure.
Unless that is done, I think we will continue to face a lot of problems in collecting evidence from outside the country. That is another challenge which remains.
All right. Yes, Mr. Chaudhary, very quickly. Yeah.
What he's pointing out, cyber terrorism, it knows no boundaries. Across nations it travels and it's very difficult to trace. So we need cyber security expertise also to be acquired by investigating agencies, not only central but also state. This cyber crime is increasing by leaps and bounds.
Sure.
People are being hoodwinked and all that. And in the police station, the Thanedar and sub-inspector sitting there, he will scratch his head and he'll say, what are you talking about? So we need, as he rightly pointed out, we need younger people, tech-savvy people who will be able to catch. We need the white hats to fight the black hats.
Sure. Yes, Satyaprakash, very quickly.
Just one second. This amendment is important from crime prevention point of view, and particularly for terrorism. Prevention is much more important than actually tackling the crime once it has happened.
Sure.
So that is why this is important.
Right. All right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.
One of the most spectacular mountain ranges in South India, the Nilgiris, lies at the westernmost part of Tamil Nadu and at the junction of Karnataka and Kerala. Nilgiri, meaning Blue Mountain, derives its name and charm from its natural setting. Its steep hills and narrow valleys are dotted with numerous rivers and rivulets.
Eid-ul-Azha being celebrated with religious fervor in Jammu and Kashmir. Prayers offered at various mosques across the state. Administration says no dearth of essential commodities. Government takes a series of steps to help general public and employees in Jammu and Kashmir. Banks to open even on holidays. 300 special telephone booths set up to help public to communicate with their kin and relatives. Eid-ul-Azha being celebrated with religious fervor to commemorate the great sacrifice of Hazrat Ibrahim and Hazrat Ismail. President, Vice President and Prime Minister greet people on the occasion. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in an interview with the National Daily, speaks about making India an investment magnet for the world. PM shares his vision on export, overseas investment, revival of the automobile sector and opportunities in Jammu and Kashmir. In international news, in the United States, at least 5 children killed after a fire ravaged a daycare center in the western Pennsylvania city of Ayer. 7 people rescued. In sports, India defeat West Indies by 59 runs by the Duckworth-Lewis method to take a 1-0 lead in the 3-match series in Port of Spain. Bhuvneshwar Kumar takes 4 wickets in 8 overs. Good morning, Eid greetings to one and all. I am Anil Thomas. Now for the stories in detail. Eid-ul-Azha is being celebrated with religious fervor across Jammu and Kashmir. In Jammu, people visited nearby mosques and offered prayers.
अल्लाह का यही हुक्म मिला है, अल्लाह का यही पैगाम मिला है। तारीख ने लिखा, इंसानों को ये पैगाम देना चाहती है, यार और मददगारी के पीछे में
In Srinagar too, special prayers were held to mark the occasion. Earlier, ahead of the Eid festival, the Jammu and Kashmir administration had taken all necessary steps to ensure an adequate supply of necessities to help locals. The J&K administration on Sunday had even issued an advisory saying that 300 special telephone booths are being established to help people communicate with their kin who are residing in different parts of India. Banks and ATMs have also been made operational for the festive season. The authorities have also deployed mobile vans for door-to-door delivery of vegetables, LPG cylinders, poultry and eggs. The administration said all health institutions in Kashmir division were functioning fully with sufficient staff as well as medicine stock. But the festival of Eid al-Azha is being also celebrated in other parts of the country with religious fervor. The festival commemorates the willingness of Prophet Ibrahim to sacrifice his son as an act of obedience to God. The festival marks the end of Hajj pilgrimage for Muslims. In New Delhi, thousands attended the special Eid namaz at Jama Masjid. People were seen exchanging greetings and warm wishes on the occasion. Similar scenes of worship and exchange of greetings were seen in Mumbai as well. In other states too, the festival is being celebrated with great fervor and traditional warmth. Eid-ul-Azha is also being observed with all fanfare in Thiruvananthapuram in Kerala. The festival was observed as citizens in large numbers offered namaz in a meeting organized by the Palayam Chandrasekharan Nair Stadium in the city. President Ramnath Kovind, Vice President and Prime Minister Narendra Modi greeted people on the occasion of Eid-ul-Azha. The President in his message offered greetings and good wishes to all fellow citizens, especially the Muslim brothers and sisters in India and abroad. He further said Eid-ul-Azha symbolizes love, fraternity and service to humanity. Let us commit ourselves to these universal values that represent our composite culture. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu also greeted people on the occasion of Eid-ul-Azha, saying the festival inspires the feeling of brotherhood, compassion and unity. The Vice President in his message said the festival is an ode to the virtues of devotion, faith and sacrifice. He hoped that the festivities will strengthen the spirit of generosity and bring people closer to one another. Prime Minister Narendra Modi greeted people on the occasion of Eid-ul-Azha. In a tweet, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "My best wishes on the occasion of Eid al-Adha. I hope it furthers the spirit of peace and happiness in our society. Eid Mubarak." Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to a business daily on a wide range of issues relating to the economy. He elaborated on the vision of making India a $5 trillion economy, plans to attract investment, boost exports, and a message for the private sector. More in this report.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said that he will leave no stones unturned in making India the best investment destination in the world, a better place to do business and go as far as possible to revive animal spirits. In his interview to a newspaper, the Prime Minister said that the decision on withdrawing Article 370 from Jammu and Kashmir will help create three necessary conditions for investment: stability, market access and predictable laws. Referring to the government's economic agenda, PM Modi said that the government wants entrepreneurs to enjoy higher productivity and better profits. He reassured all honest and law-abiding businesses of all possible support from the government. The PM went the extra mile to appeal to bankers to pass on the benefits of low interest to borrowers while assuring them against any harassment. Talking about automobile sector, the Prime Minister said that the slowdown is temporary, which is due to some regulatory changes and passiveness in demand. He added that the country has a large enough market and big enough policy space to ensure growth of internal combustion engine-based automobiles as well as electric vehicles. Further, he said that the government is committed to fulfilling the 5-year vision of investment-led growth with a target of ₹100 lakh crore. He said that the government is focused on making it convenient for global firms to bring goods in a frictionless manner into India. PM Modi emphasized that the part of his vision to double farmers' income by 2022 is driven by a focus on increasing exports, especially related to agriculture sector. He stressed that the next step for the government on GST is to improve consumer awareness of the benefits of system, which is totally missing currently. Bureau Report, DD News.
On to some weather news. After pounding Kerala for days, there was some let up in the rain fury on Sunday, even as the toll climbed to 72, with 58 people still missing and over 2.51 lakh people in relief camps across the state. Various agencies including the Army, Navy, Coast Guard, NDRF, police force, volunteers and fishermen are involved in the rescue operations at various places. Indian Air Force helicopters of the Southern Air Command dropped food packets over the flood-affected areas of Malappuram district. Over 1,000 kgs of food items were airdropped in multiple sorties. Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan held multiple review meetings with senior officials. Meanwhile, The Kochi International Airport, which was closed for 2 days after inundation on the runway, has resumed operations on Sunday. Union Home Minister Amit Shah carried out an aerial survey of the flood-affected Belagavi district of Karnataka. He was accompanied by Chief Minister B.S. Yedurappa, Union Ministers Prahlad Joshi, among others. The Home Minister also held a meeting with top government officials and interacted with officials involved in the relief and rescue operation. In a tweet, the Home Minister said that both centre and state government are committed to help the distressed people. Meanwhile, rain has subsided in Belagavi, but water released from dams has inundated several areas. The relief and rescue operation continues as around 2 lakh people displaced and over 50,000 livestock were evacuated from 245 villages in the district. Over 370 relief camps have been opened for the affected people. All schools and colleges, both government and private, in the affected and flood-hit districts will remain closed till August 15th. Home Minister Amit Shah also carried out an aerial survey of the flood-affected Sangli and Kolhapur districts in Maharashtra on Sunday. He was briefed by Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis about the current flood situation and the measures undertaken in the southwestern part of the state. At least 40 people have died and over 3.78 lakh people have been evacuated after heavy rains and a release of large amount of water from various dams resulted in unprecedented floods in Kolhapur and Sangli. Pune, Satara and Sholapur districts were also affected by the floods. Women and girls tied Rakhi to Army and Navy jawans in flood-affected areas of Sangli in Maharashtra as an expression of gratitude. The women thanked the soldiers for rescuing locals out of the horrific flood and showed their gratitude by tying Rakhis to the soldiers on the occasion of Raksha Bandhan.
अजून जवान येणार आहेत सगळ्यांचा कार्यक्रम एकदम मिठाई या ठिकाणी आहे आपल्या दारात येईल का आपल्या घरात येईल का असं म्हणून आपण चिंतेत होतो सगळ्यांनी पुन्हा एकदा टाळ्या वाजवून अभिनंदन करा भारत माता की जय.
As heavy showers continue to lash parts of Gujarat, the toll in the rain-related incidents rose to 31. The Met Department has predicted heavy rainfall at isolated places in Saurashtra and Kutch regions for today as well. Fishermen are advised not to venture into the sea as squally weather is likely to prevail along and off the Gujarat coast due to active monsoon conditions. Several parts of central Gujarat and Saurashtra along with Kutch regions have been receiving heavy rainfall since Friday. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, who is on a 3-day visit to China today, met his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi in Beijing. Both the leaders exchanged pleasantries. The External Affairs Minister will co-chair the second meeting of the India-China high-level mechanism on cultural and people-to-people exchanges. Earlier in the day, External Affairs Minister called on Vice President of China Wang Quishan. In Nepal, hundreds of Indian citizens and friends of India enthusiastically participated in a Bharat Mahotsav at Kathmandu on Saturday. The event was organized by the Indian Citizens Association of Nepal and the Embassy of India to celebrate the 73rd Independence Day of India. A report from our Kathmandu correspondent Rajkumar. The Embassy of India in Kathmandu was fully gripped by patriotic fervour on Saturday. The occasion was the second Bharat Mahotsav organized by the Indian Citizen Association of Nepal. Indian Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri inaugurated the festival. Students of Modern Indian School, Kendriya Vidyalaya and DAV School enthralled the audience. Indian citizens and persons of Indian origin, especially children, enthusiastically participated in the program.
बहुत अच्छा, सब लोग हमारा डांस भी देखने आए थे, बहुत दूर से, सब बहुत अच्छा लगा।
सब जगह के कुछ ना कुछ सांस्कृतिक प्रोग्राम हो रहे थे, तो ऐसा लगता है कि आज पूरा देश एक छत के नीचे आ गया है। बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है, हमने विदेश में होकर भी हमको हमारे भारत देश की याद आती है प्रोग्राम में आके।
तिरंगे से बहुत प्यार है क्योंकि ये मेरा तिरंगा है।
A large number of Nepali friends also joined India's Independence Day celebration.
India and Nepal has such a good friendship and I'm really proud of it. And as being a part of this is really amazing.
The diversity in the cultures from the Rajasthan to the Punjabi Sikhs, I really enjoyed the performance, and as always I have always admired my Indian friends.
It's very fun. I'm Nepali, but I enjoy Indian culture, Indian dances, Indian food and all of it, and I love India.
A food festival of Indian cuisines was also organized. People enjoyed variety of delicious Indian food. The main attraction of Bharat Mahotsav was the Jugni band from Delhi. The band captivated audience with more than 2 hours with its mesmerizing performance. Rajkumar's report from Kathmandu for DD News. Meanwhile, in the United States, at least 5 children died in an early morning fire in Pennsylvania at a residential building. 8 people were in the home when the fire broke out at around 1:15 a.m. The home also operated as a daycare center. 4 of the victims were siblings who were being cared for at a daycare center. An adult also at the house was hospitalized. Firefighters rescued the 5 children from second-story bedrooms at the front of the home. The fire remained under investigation by police and fire officials. Hong Kong police have once again clashed with anti-government protesters as the city enters its 10th week of mass demonstrations and unrest. Police fired tear gas across the city on Sunday night, including into an enclosed railway station. In the Wang Chai district, petrol bombs and bricks were thrown at riot police, who responded by charging at protesters with batons. A number of people, including a police officer, were injured in the clashes. On sports, Captain Virat Kohli led from the front with a brilliant century, 42nd of his career, to guide India to a comfortable 59-run victory over West Indies using the Duckworth-Lewis method in the second one-day international at the Port of Spain on Sunday night. By virtue of the win on Sunday, India take a 1-0 lead in the 3-match series. The first ODI between the two sides was washed out. The third and final ODI will be played at the same venue on Wednesday.
Yeah, still Chris Gayle, he will be congratulated. He is
अपील यहाँ पर होती हुई पैड पर लगी और ये आउट.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will feature in a special episode of the iconic survival television series Man vs. Wild on Discovery Channel tonight. It will be broadcast at 9 p.m. The show will be hosted by renowned adventurer Bear Grylls. Shot in the Jim Corbett National Park, the show will create awareness about environmental changes and wildlife conservation. The episode will be showcased in over 180 countries across the world.
Whole planet. You got tigers, crocodiles, elephants, and a lot of snakes. Prime Minister Modi might be leader of the biggest democracy in the world, but out here, it's the wild that's in charge.
Thousands of students and members of several social organizations unfurled a 15-kilometer-long national flag by forming a human chain in Chhattisgarh's capital, Raipur city, on Sunday ahead of Independence Day. The event, organized by Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam Foundation, entered the Champions Book of World Records for the longest tricolor. Thousands of people, including those belonging to 35 social organizations across the state and students from various schools, created a human chain while holding a 15-kilometer-long tricolor from Amapara Chowk to Pandit Ravi Shankar Shukla University. Soldiers from the state police and CRPF battalions also took part in the march. Divyangs on wheelchairs led the march, which was one of the most amusing and important moments of the march. Well, that's all we have time for in this edition of English News. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.